Well, hey everyone, welcome to your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. Well, if you haven't heard, guess what? We're on YouTube, so check us out over there. And when you do, please like the video and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Well, today we're continuing our conversation on type 6s by interviewing literally a panel of 6s. We've got 4 of them here today, and we can't wait for you to hear them. Now, as we all know, type 6s have the same core motivation and EIP parts, but you can't put all 6s into the same box. So today we get to hear from each of their unique stories and how their EIP parts show up in different ways.
Now, Beth was just using those 3 letters, EIP, and maybe you don't know what that stands for. It stands for Enneagram Internal Profile. You can go back to episode 112 where we go through kind of a different perspective of talking about our Enneagram types. And also, if you are a type 6, if you go back to our previous episode 131, you can actually hear us talk through the EIP or the Enneagram Internal Profile for specifically the type 6. Before we begin our conversation with our panel today, why don't we talk about what is EIP? And have you ever thought to yourself, this, I feel a lot of different things. Or maybe you've thought, part of me wants to do this, part of me wants to do that. Or maybe your spouse or a friend says like, hey, you showed up in a really different way in that experience. I've never experienced that part of you before. Well, this is revealing something about who we are as people, is that we're not just one thing, we're actually a lot of things. And the map of the Enneagram helps to give insight into that. And it shows us in a dynamic way whether or not our hearts are aligned with the truth of the gospel. And so we use EIP to help us understand the various parts of how we relate to the world. Our main type has 2 parts, that is our misaligned wounded child and the gospel-led beloved child. And then we have our 4 connecting parts, the 2 wings, that's right, both wings, and the 2 paths. Those 2 paths can show up both healthy and unhealthy. When our wounded child is trying to lead, it's going to bring about some of the more less healthy, more survival-oriented traits that we've picked up over the years. But yet, this other beloved part of our hearts actually is where the gifting really lies, because that's where we're able to move forward in life with faith and confidence in what all that Jesus has accomplished for us in his life, death, and resurrection. So today, we've got 3 type 6s with us.
Plus yourself.
And I can include myself, but this is about the guest and not about my interior world and my unhealthiness.
You're included.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. It's going to remind me of the joys of what it means to live with a 6.
Are you projecting?
Am I projecting?
I'm just kidding. That was an
You are
Enneagram
crazy.
joke.
I'm not projecting anything. I'm talking reality. That's what I'm talking about. Well, first up is Erin, and she's a personal development coach and a certified Enneagram coach with YEC. She works with individuals and specializes in relationship dynamics and families, or for families, couples, and teams. She enjoys helping people understand their relationships better so that they can thrive. You can find out more about her support groups she offers for each Enneagram type by going to www.erinsur, that's SUR.com. Erin, we're so glad that you joined us. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and so how long have you been interested in the Enneagram?
So I have a friend that had introduced me, spiritual mentor, probably about 6 years ago.
Yes.
And like all of us, got all excited and geeked out on it and,
Yeah.
kind of learned all about, wow, someone has introduced me to myself, and that's why I do what I do and how I feel. And then, of course, you look outward, your family and everyone else. And then I started using it in my coaching practice, and it was so helpful and such a game changer for my clients, the ones that were open to it, that I was like, I have to get certified in this. So
That's awesome. I love that phrase that you used. It introduced me to myself. And there is a dynamic of that with Enneagram. Like, not only do those who are nearest to us say, like, that gives me understanding of you, but it also gives us understanding of ourselves. Like, that's the word. That's what I've been looking for and why I do it. Well, next up is Adam Breckenridge. Adam's married to his lifelong best friend, Carrie. He serves as the director of coaching here at Your Enneagram Coach. He's been a pastor and coach for more than 20 years and is passionate about providing a safe place for others to grow and deepen their relationship with God, others, and themselves. Adam, it's always fun. A lot of our listeners will know about you because you've been on these
Yes.
podcasts and led these podcasts, but today you're here because you're a 6. When did you find out about the Enneagram?
Oh man, so it was about 7 years ago. I was pastoring church in Kansas City. Did that thing where you hit the wall and you burn out, and I fell into the care of an Enneagram coach who was also a Type 6 in his 60s. So he was a little bit further down the road than me. A lot further down the road than me, and he helped me discover my type. And I think the moment I realized that I was my type, like when I finally accepted that I was a Type 6, was when, despite the fact that he and my wife and others who were taking the Enneagram around that time kept telling me over and over, "You're a 6," and despite that, I still wasn't sure. So
Mm.
every time they would say, "No, dude, but you're doing the thing now," like you're
You're doing
yeah,
the
you're
thing.
doing the thing sixes do, because you're reading all this stuff and saying, "Yeah, that sounds like me, but I'm still not sure." And it's like, that's because you're a 6, you know. Like you're not you're not sure about anything. That's like
How funny.
you're typing yourself. So,
Yes.
but it is that thing of like where you feel like you were introduced to yourself. You feel like you discovered
Mhm.
yourself, and I feel like I was being discovered and being known by God in a fresh way, and that has been a life changing experience for me for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and next up is Nathan. Nate serves as the special projects manager for the CEO of Your Enneagram Coach.
Which happens to be you.
Which happens to be me. That's right. Nate is my son. He recently completed his Enneagram coaching certification with YEC. And not only has he been certified through YEC, but he's also has an honorary degree having been raised by
Your Enneagram
informed
coach.
people. So I would say, Nate, how long have you known about the Enneagram? But I'm not sure there's ever been a day that you remember that you didn't know about the Enneagram. But it's been a lifelong story. So not only were you a pastor's kid, but you're now an Enneagram coach kid.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when for you as adolescents, teenager, or whatever, started to really recognize like, oh, this Enneagram thing actually is helpful?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I remember all of it, but what I do remember is wrestling through with my mom. Obviously, your guys' Enneagram coach. Uh, if I was a 2 or a 1, and then probably about maybe a year into that, we finally landed on 6, and that's because I got into middle school and I started to experience some real life tragedy and adversity, and it was very clear that I was willing to forsake all ethical rules for my friends, and I was loyal to a default. And so it was pretty clear from then on that I was 6, but it definitely helped. But I don't think it was until later high school and into college where I really started to use the language of the Enneagram to not only just name what I was doing, but also to use it to see where I can head in my relationship with the Lord, myself, and with others.
That's
Well, and it
awesome.
was kind of, I think what's interesting is like you were still well versed in it even when you went to college, but it
Mhm.
probably, like you said, wasn't until you went to college that you realized, oh, wait, all my friends think this thing is really incredible. And
Yeah,
you're the one that had most of the answers for it because you grew up with it.
sure.
Then you started realizing, oh, yeah, this is super beneficial. Whereas a lot of people, it was their first experience with the Enneagram
Yeah.
was going off to college. So,
So many different stories about what it means to parent through the lens of the Enneagram, and so many stories of great conversations, tough conversations, and everything in between.
so our last guest on our show, and our last guest on the panel is you, Jeff McCord. So tell us, how did you find out you were a type 6?
Well, a mentor gave me Richard Rohr's book in 2001. I was in a conservative Presbyterian seminary. And so Richard Rohr was probably not one of our top 10 authors that they would have recommended at the time. So, but his therapist had given him a book, this Christian perspective on the Enneagram, and I skimmed it. I mean, I was reading a lot and working full-time in campus ministry, and so I skimmed it, thought it was valuable, and then talked with Beth about it, but you devoured it. Well, at the time, I really thought I was an 8.
And why is that?
I don't quite understand.
Well,
because it was consistent with the way I was relating to the world, Beth.
Yeah, but someone else had some insights.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yes. Beth did not type me, but she thought that I was more like a 6 than I was an 8.
And you were like, because then I was like, yeah, like my mom, like you ask all these questions and stuff. And he was like, I am nothing like your mom, which is true because my mom is very much on the phobic self-preservation 6, and you're very much more on the counterphobic
yes
1-to-1 6.
I did not, like your mom reminds me of how anxious I really am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I did not
but
like that.
As a counterphobic 6, counterphobic 6s don't want to recognize their fear. They want to plow into their fear. And so for you, it was really hard. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, even though it's a tongue-in-cheek funny thing, because it's like, who was right? Anyway, but the reason why I bring it up is because there's so many people out there that, especially 6s, that will mistype themselves in different ways because, like, even like Adam, like, I don't know, am I sure I'm this? 6s say the most, well, I'm not sure because it depends. Mm-hmm. And 6s say that the most. Yes. It depends. Mm-hmm. But counterphobic 6s can have a hard time landing on their type because they do have on the outside a lot of behaviors and qualities that look very 8-ish. Yes. And that can confuse a lot of people.
Well, what ended up happening is we went through a pastoral intensive at Dallas Seminary, and that same therapist who gave the book to my mentor, we were doing some marriage and family counseling with him. And I had written out a storyline, kind of timeline of my life. And he said, Jeff, you're not an 8, you're a 6. And I got so upset. I put the Enneagram away for an entire year.
Because in your mind, you're like, I can't trust this.
That's right. But back to what Erin said, I was introduced to myself. Yeah. And it was a part of my life I did not want to see. But
well, Adam, wasn't that true for you too?
Yeah.
Like, wait, I don't have fear, I have anger. And it's like, well, let's dig into that.
I would have described myself as angry, and that was the less vulnerable feeling. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was, I had a coach sit with me and be curious and pull the thread that I was able to, once I saw my fear, I couldn't unsee it. And it was kind of day one of the rest of my life. I saw, okay, I'm actually very afraid. And, a dog shows its teeth and bows up because it's afraid, right? So, that was how I coped with my fear. My whole life was just trying to get bigger than the fear, And so, pushing into it, getting angry, being more aggressive, whether that was in sports or the way I talked or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. But just in all fairness, just to let the other 6s out there know that are like my mom, that's the complete opposite of how my mom was. As a self-preservation 6, a phobic 6, she would succumb to her fears and anxieties and avoid them or try to get around them or prevent them from happening. And I think that's what we read a lot more about in a lot of the, books and stuff out there. And so that's why this other kind of type of 6 will mistype often because they're like, well, I'm not like that. So,
Well, Bethy, why don't you start us off with just giving us an overview summary of the type 6?
Yeah. So the type 6s are so reliable. They're hardworking, dutiful, and steady. And you're going to find that these 6s are faithful. They're super courageous, loyal, and committed. Now, they have this internal committee that offers them a lot of insights by chiming in with contradictory thoughts, all the multiple possibilities that are out there, analysis, worst case scenarios, and a flood of questions. And this inner committee constantly causes them to second guess themselves. And so you're going to see a lot of self-doubt, and they're also going to look to consult with others before they make that final decision because of that self-doubt. I mean, you could imagine, like, if you have like, okay, well, I need to go do this. And then all of a sudden you have an inner committee that's saying, well, did you think about this or that? Or what about this? Did you plan for this contingency? Well, what if that doesn't work? All of a sudden you're kind of stopped in your tracks with analysis paralysis. And so you want to talk to someone that you trust to kind of give you the green light to move forward, and to feel more safe and secure in that. So that's really kind of what's going on for sixes. Now, their focus of attention is always scanning the horizon to predict and plan for negative outcomes, especially worst case scenarios, so that they won't happen and that they can prevent harm. But what I want you to see is just the great attributes and strengths that a six has. They are extremely loyal, faithful to those that they put their trust into. They're also diligent, responsible, hardworking. They're so compassionate towards others, and they're great troubleshooters. Because they've already thought through all the worst case scenarios. So if you wonder, like, well, what should I do in this instance? They probably thought of it and have a plan for you. The other thing I really love and enjoy is their great sense of humor. We have a lot of sixes on our YEC team. And when we ever do Zoom calls, we always are laughing and having great fun. So the sixes lead the way in that. Now, the sixes all have the same core motivations. So let's go through those. Their core fear is the fear of fear itself, being without support, security, or guidance, being blamed, targeted, alone, and physically abandoned. But they have a core desire of having security, guidance, and support. Now, they're going to wrestle with the core weakness of anxiety. Now, everyone can be anxious. That's not what we're saying, is that the sixes have the take on anxiety. That's not what this is about. But for the sixes, the anxiety is that scanning the horizon and trying to predict and prevent negative outcomes. And so they're constantly thinking and planning and predicting and always on like the edge of their seat of what might happen and being ready for it. Now, for them, they have this core longing. The message their heart longs to hear and experience is, you are safe and secure.
Well, why don't we start off with this? When you first discovered, we'll go a little bit further in regards to when you first found out that you were a six. Share a little bit, and we'll start off with you, Erin. Whenever you found out that you were a six, what was that experience like for you?
I think it's a bittersweet, because you now are understanding why I do what I do. And at first you kind of like, oh, I don't want to be that person that is, well, what about that? What about that? Because to me, that paints a picture of someone who's um, anxious or unstable. But then when you go deeper and you understand the six, then you're like, okay, um, I get flooded with compassion for myself and then my clients that I'm working with, because you're understanding what's driving that behavior. But really, what I love when I found that out about myself is the tools to be able to then kind of calm myself down or talk through, okay, I'm seeing I'm getting triggered a little bit. And then at that point, having the tools to kind of know what to do, and that's okay, it's all good, you've taken care of it, don't worry about it. So talking myself off the ledge, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very comforting, because for me, it's finding that balance and that medium of not always feeling anxious. And there's different sixes. I don't always feel anxious, but certain things will definitely trigger
Sure.
that six, and I can recognize it now.
Adam, what was it for you that convinced you that you were a six?
I mean, probably as I said earlier, the fact that I wasn't sure about being a six was kind of the proof was in the pudding. But no, to me, I think one of the things that honestly convinced me that I was a six was I noticed that I noticed when I first took the Enneagram and started reading about a six, I felt so exposed.
Mm.
And that to me, there I knew in my gut, like this is pinning me to the wall. This is reading my mail or whatever, however you want to say it. I knew that it was right. And then the next thing that happened that proved to me that I was a six is I started to go into self protection early on, and I started to think in my mind, here's all the people that cannot find this out. Like in my mind, I was like, here's the people that cannot know this about me because this will be used against me. And it was that,
Mm.
authority will use this against me. Like, no, people can't know this. And honestly, in that place of fear and going deep into the, unhealthy pathology of a six, the Spirit of God honestly just spoke this comforting word of, hey, I know all this about you and I love you. And it was a profound experience of having parts because part of me was scared of the exposure. Part of me felt profoundly comforted to be that known and that loved. It was so, I felt some security for once of like, man, I know myself, and God knows me, and He knows all these things about me, and He loves me, and the right people will still love me, even though they know these things about. Here's the funny thing is, my wife already knew all these things about me. She knew I was hyper vigilant and
Yes.
anxious, and she loved
Oh,
me.
that was
You know,
totally Beth. I mean, when I was, she stayed so quiet and kind to let me boast about being an eight and
For
knowing the
five
whole
years.
time for 5 years.
No,
yes,
but okay, but in all honesty, that's why mistyping is such a real thing
yeah,
because you did appear very eight-ish in that fear. So I think that's, it's something for us to recognize. That's why the core motivations are so important because it's not about the outward manifestation of the type. It is about why you do what you do.
mm,
Well, why don't we take our first step and dabble our toes into EIP? There are two basic parts to our main types. That is the wounded child, the misaligned wounded child, and the aligned with the truth of the gospel, beloved child. So we're going to focus in on the wounded child. The wounded child's the part of our main type that has been hurt, betrayed, experienced the pain of living in a fallen and sinful world. It's the vulnerable and tender part of our hearts. It reacts from a history of painful experiences. As a matter of fact, we may even feel a bit younger, or it may
Mm-hmm.
put us in certain situations and reminding us of its story.
Yeah.
Its primal need is to protect itself from more harm. Beth, why don't you talk about what the wounded child looks like for the type 6?
Yeah. So, as a child, type sixes longed to hear that you were safe and secure and to really experience that. And they desired to have that guidance and support and security because the world felt so dangerous and very overwhelming and unreliable. And so they would avoid potential harm, chaos, insecurity, and try really hard to predict and strategize of what might go wrong and to get away and around it. Now, their inner committee starts at an early age, informing them of all the possibilities that could happen. But this also brings a lot of uncertainty and confusion to this young mind. And so all of a sudden, they have this indecisiveness, this self doubt. Now, for them, they're really trying to seek out a reliable source, someone that can guide them, an authority figure that they can trust, that would provide them that safety and security. But the problem is, sixes really struggle to trust authority figures. And so it causes them to continually experience anxiety and worry. Now, the wounded child part will also add to this by saying false messages, and it convinces the wounded child, this little child, that it's true. So some of the false messages would be, it's not okay to trust myself. That's a message that they would hear, and they would be convinced of it. And a lot of it comes around because of that inner committee. Well, which part am I supposed to listen to? And so for them, they really saw the world as a very dangerous place. And they just longed for someone that they trust, someone stronger, wiser to come along and say, you are safe and secure. I've got you. And this continues to be the message that adult sixes long to hear and experience as well.
So, Nate, let's talk with you because although we have faced hardships as a family, but it not a particularly tragic storyline for you, but yet you still felt a little unsafe in the world. Tell us about when you started to identify the wounded part of your own heart.
Yeah. Um, so I would say, like I said earlier, probably middle school was when um, I really started to see that wounded child in my life. Um, Before, and we've talked about this a lot as a family, but um, I was a very innocent, happy, fun kid that um, I think my 7 wing came out a ton, and um, used a lot of two as well in my tri type. And so I was just very happy. But in middle school, as my friendship started to deepen, and I also started to fall into depression for the first time, struggling with some learning disabilities, as well as a decent amount of pressure in my Christian school, to kind of be the good pastor kid, and a leader. I would rebel in different ways. And I would get angry at the injustice of expectation, or that I wasn't allowed to be a kid anymore. I
Mhm.
think from an early age, I would tell you guys, I can't wait to be an adult. I just wanted adult things because I thought that's when you landed in a safe place,
Mm,
because as a kid you didn't know enough. You weren't prepared, you weren't ready, and so that's where the I can't trust myself
mm.
came from. And so it was either spiritual guidance, or, where do I go? What do I do? All those kinds of things. It was just endless thoughts.
And
Yeah.
Um,
also, like in middle school, your loyalty, like you said, your friendships deepened and your loyalty deepened.
mhm.
And that got really hard when you saw injustices. Because it wasn't so much that injustices were happening to you, right?
So in seventh and eighth grade, I was in the same private Christian school, and we had some very difficult history classes. And a lot of my friends, including me, were studying countless hours for these exams, and a lot of us were failing them, if not getting very low grades for how much we were studying. Well, me being the loyalist that I was and that I was becoming to know, I actually I found the answer key and took it to school and started writing the answers on note cards and giving it to friends who wanted it, because I thought it was such an injustice that they were asking these seventh and eighth graders to put 10 plus hours into studying for a history exam, that I wasn't going to let my friends fail. And so we finally got caught, and it was this big fiasco and all this stuff. And still, I told certain friends to not share that they cheated, because they might have only done one thing, and I was going to take even more of the blame. And so
Wow.
it was pretty clear at that point that I was not a one. A type 1 would have never done that,
Yeah.
but I was willing to forsake any rule or ethical decision for the sake of my friends. Um, and, as much as I am sad that that story happens, and that there is that conflict, there's part of me that doesn't regret it, because I think I'm really thankful for that part of my heart that is willing to protect those that I love, that I trust. And it shows, just when you have a sixth trust, you have them all. Like, we
Mhm.
are all in, even if you're not.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move towards the beloved part, and talk about what is it that we can do to bring healing to this part of our wounded child. Well, the beloved child is that part of us that's spirit filled. So the New Testament talks about old self and new self. It talks about the flesh and the spirit. Um, and so there's this dynamic happening inside of. As a matter of fact, Paul even explains it as a war that's happening between us, because these parts of us desire different things. Well, when we were speaking to the beloved part, we're actually talking to the part that's spirit filled, that where the Spirit guides, the Spirit leads, the Spirit reminds us of all the things that Christ has done for us, and which actually becomes the very part of us that uses all of these various skills that we've used to survive as the wounded child, now become a gift, an instrument in our sense of calling and relationships with others. And so, Bethy, why don't you walk through what the beloved child looks like for the type 6?
Yeah, so the beloved child, the great thing about it is that it knows who you are, but more importantly, whose you are. Like you said, it's the spirit-led self. It knows, as a 6, it knows that they're loved, that they're provided for, that they're safe, and that they have all of Christ's blessings. And then they no longer have to seek safety and security from all the other people out there, that they can get it straight from God himself, that he will give them the guidance, the information, the discernment, the insights that they are so longing for. And part of that can be through people. But we know that he will provide in his due timing. So instead of hearing those false messages, the beloved child can say to itself, because the Holy Spirit's discernment, guidance, and support are now mine, I can confidently and courageously face life's trials with assurance that I'm going to be okay.
Well, Erin, why don't we start with you and maybe just share a little bit about that wounded part of your heart as a 6, but also how the beloved shows up for you in bringing healing and leadership to your wounded heart.
Mm. Yeah, so my wounding clearly came from my childhood and really my family dynamics. And I was a third of 3. My sister was 5 years older. My brother was 4 years older. And so, and my mom worked. She was very successful in her career. And in even after hours for her, when she got home, she's a pediatric nurse practitioner. She's a lactation consultant and, you know, the world's top breastfeeding advocate and all of that. And so she would be on the phone for hours, even helping these poor moms that were like, I can't get my baby, to nurse. So for me, I often found myself kind of trying to figure life out by myself because it was just kind of like,
Right.
siblings kind of weren't around, parent, and I had, a great childhood. It's nothing. It was just more circumstantial that the wounding from me was like, I got to figure it all out for myself. Or I often found myself unprepared or ill-equipped and not feeling empowered to, you know what I mean, kind of be able to navigate a little bit. So I quickly realized I have to navigate things. And by doing that, I need to kind of foresee stuff because I'm not having, someone maybe go ahead of me or, so anyway, on the healing side of that is it really did help me as an adult, and really the Enneagram did help me to understand that side of knowing that oftentimes they say for 6s is courage, but really I like the word of faith,
Mm.
because it is then having faith in God that ultimately he is going to take care of me. And then understanding that piece of the Enneagram of like, okay, um, it's just, this is no longer serving me
Mm.
anymore. That I understand why I kind of get triggered or react that way, but I don't have to stay there.
Mm.
And so that side of it is just having the relaxing and knowing that God has my back. He gave me an incredible husband who's a 9, who is just my rock. And so having him and just that support system and
Yeah.
that healing side of the Enneagram has been amazing
Mm.
to
I,
help to know and be confident and courageous, that I can go out in the world and I don't have to, control everything. Or
that one transition that you spoke to of that I feel like I'm alone in the world and I'm going to have to start foreseeing things in order to make it in this world. You said it in different words, but I so resonate with that transition because it's so default for me. Like even in my conversion experience, it it was I'm going to be the best you've ever seen. Meaning it wasn't like I'm going to need somebody's help to do this. It was just, I'm going to prove that I can do it. And which, if a little kid comes up to me and says, yeah, I'm going to show you, one of my kids had ever come to me and say, like, I'm going to be an adult. I know how to do this. I'd be like, hey, let me help you. But for some reason in that sick's heart and seeing the world, it was, I'm out here alone. And now I've somehow have to prepare for whatever contingencies may arrive. Adam, do you have anything else you would add to what the beloved does when that's embodied and how it leads all of your various parts?
I would add, if you're familiar with, well, first of all, I'll say I'm the experience of being alone and feeling almost detached, like I don't have a secure base. Was it's really, that's the image. It's not just one specific memory, but when I look at my wounded child, that is the image I have of him. It's the way that that part of me felt, and so. But one of the gifts that my beloved child, this spirit-led self, brings is, I think about Psalm 131, where David says, "I have calmed and quieted my soul." And what I love about that is David's not tooting his horn, but he doesn't say like God calmed and quieted me. He says I have calmed and quieted my soul. So there's this element of self leadership or self control at play. And I have not arrived at this. I am learning this. I'm very much a student at this, but I can say that I've tried this on, and it works. Like, so the opposite of calm is anxious, and the opposite of quiet is loud, and that's the way the wounded child feels very anxious. The inner committee is very loud. There's lots of internal frenetic energy that's happening there. And I have found that this part of me, the beloved child, brings this ability to center myself in the gospel, and bring about a peace and a calm to myself. And it may look like backing away from my desk and breathing for 5 minutes, or going for a walk, or something along those lines. But I'll say this: this is actually, I've actually just put words to this recently. This is what feels so profound about the beloved child's voice and presence whenever that part of me is driving in the spirit, is that that part of me will remind me, which is also the spirit's job, right, to remind us of what Christ has said. And that part of me will remind me of God's promises, and remind me of God's presence, that God is, I mean, the number one thing he says is, don't be afraid. Why? Because I'm with you. And so that part it will remind me. And what's so sweet about it is that the promises of God, when that happens, no longer feel like cold platitudes. There's a way to counsel people where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
take two Bible verses and call me in the morning. Here's a couple of platitudes to slap on your anxiety, and bada bing, bada boom. It doesn't feel like that. It feels authentic, and that's what's so important to the wounded child, and to a type 6 period, is just that authenticity. But what happens, the wounded child, it's like resonates with what the beloved child is saying, because the wounded child is going, oh, he's actually tasted and seen this. Like, he's experienced, like, it's almost like the wounded child wakes up to, Adam has actually experienced the love of God. Like, Adam is not, he's not an orphan. Like, this is an authentic, he's saying, he's reminding me of and coaching me along God's promises, because he's actually experienced them. Like, this is,
Yes.
it goes from being this platitude to being this reality. And that has been that only recently have I named that that's what it's felt like. In the past, I've relied, I think, on my top 5, which we'll talk about in a minute probably, but has tried to use logic to talk me out of my fear, or like thrown Bible verses at me, or theology or knowledge, in a way that feels like cold platitudes, and it's not helpful. It's not
Mm-hmm.
helpful. But the beloved child shows up with a completely
Yes.
different presence, a completely different presence. Yeah.
Well, next up is we're going to start talking about the connecting types to our main type. So if you look at the Enneagram symbol, you'll notice there's 2 numbers, and we call those wings, that are right next to your main type. And then there are the lines and arrows that speak to the Enneagram paths. Well, For the type 6, we have two wings. And one of the unique things that we're trying to emphasize here is that we use both wings. Now, we may use one more than others, and one may show up in certain contexts versus others, but they're both part of who you are. It's not just a descriptive subtype, it's actually much more than that. These parts of you have personality, they have desires, they have motivations behind them. And whenever they are working on behalf of the wounded child and they start to operate in an misaligned or an unhealthy way, but if they're being led by the beloved part, you're going to find these parts of you as a gift. So for the type 5 wing, that's the part of the 6 that's observant, wise, curious, analytical, intellectual, and emotionally distant and independent. It feel that this 5 part doesn't feel like it has enough knowledge to move forward competently, and therefore it's going to withdraw to gain information. It needs to feel guided and secure. So when your wing 5 part is misaligned and trying to protect your wounded child, you may notice a few things. You may notice that building boundaries so that you can privately process your racing thoughts and anxieties and escape people who are draining your energy. You may become fiercely independent, secretive, maybe even isolated to protect yourself from potential harm or disloyalty and betrayal. You may look to books or belief system for guidance and security more than your own committed relationships. But when you're 5 part, when this wing trusts in the truth of the gospel and is being led by the beloved child, it no longer needs the unhealthy strategies to protect itself. But from this place of rest, you're going to notice a few radically different things. And they're going to be more insightful, well researched, willing to courageously engage with life's uncertainties, to know that they are resources and they are prepared with whatever may come up. They become more generous and give to others from the wealth of wisdom and information that they've gathered over time. And they may connect with others from both an intellectual place as well as an emotional. So tell me this, and I'm not sure who would like to go first here, but Adam, maybe we'll start with you. You mentioned your 5 wing. Why don't we start with you? And so your 5 wing at times starts to lead by, I'm going to do this theologically, I'm going to do this intellectually.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I've noticed I'll try to my type 5 part when it's showing up in a self-protecting way, to kind of protect the wounded child, in service of the wounded child. I'll try to connect with people with my head instead of my heart, and I will lead out of intellect. I notice that I'll try to connect and lead out of my competency, and I'll try to use logic and theology or reason, whatever I can, to avoid my emotions, especially fear. And I'll even use Bible verses to shame my fear, like to, and so and that's just one of the ways that type 5 can show up as you're saying,
Yes.
in a misaligned way for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Erin or Nate, do you guys resonate with the 5 part of your heart, and how does that show up in your life?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I definitely go to my 5 for security because it feels like I'm doing something. Because at that point, I can like, okay, what's the game plan here? And it's kind of satisfies or pacifies that kind of anxiety, or I feel out of control. So now I want to feel more control, and so what's the plan? And so I'll, specifically start to like map out what that is and gather information, and it's making me feel more comfortable or confident to get all that on board, so that then I can, it just kind of relieves that pressure from
Yeah.
me. So then I'm like, okay, I have a plan in place, or I have information, or that I did maybe get some answers, feel more equipped or empowered. And so that's the unhealthy. The
Yeah.
healthy also then feels in us, it's kind of ends up being more of a spiritual version of it, where I'm not running on anxiety to gather the information. um I call it like the turtle, like I can pull everything in my head, and
Mm-hmm.
my, I got to get all that information like
Mm.
the 5 does, so I can go back out but it's different on the beloved child,
Yeah.
because it's a completely different energy. Like what Adam was saying, it's now empowered, because I'm going and checking in with God, with the
Mm.
source, and
Yes.
that's completely different than just gathering information from the world to equip it. It's more, I'm like, okay, now what's driving is God's power and his wisdom and his,
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit is
Yes.
now, and it's just, it's completely, and it is that, that exhaling. And when I really lean into him, then it's like, okay, I'm good. And especially if I feel like I'm right there in alignment and I'm hearing God go ahead of me, kind of like, Joshua, like you had, kind of quoted Joshua, do not be afraid.
Mm.
Do not fear. I'm always with you. I'm
Mm.
ahead of
Yes.
you. And so I kind of have to tell myself that and then go into that, prayer, whatever it is for me. And then I'm like, okay, so that feels very comforting because it's the opposite of my wounded, which didn't feel like I had any guidance. And then as an adult, I know where my source and guidance
Mm.
comes
Yes.
from. So, but I have to still choose it. I still have to
Sure.
choose to go to him and not Erin and my default, because I
Yeah.
want to
That's right.
default to me, but I have to now, it's like, wait a minute, you're defaulting to yourself. That's only going to, you're going to burn out, or that's only going to take me so
Yeah.
far. So then it's really reminding myself to go there and really get equipped in the right way.
It's interesting to hear you guys talk about my own experience because it's very similar. I can remember specific times where I'd come up to a situation or circumstance, and that could have been a sermon, a leadership decision, change in organization, any number of things. And I immediately Amazon would start showing up at the door, like I'm buying books, baby,
Yeah.
and I mean I'm going to prepare for this. And it wasn't until in my 30s that I started to realize, like, this rarely works. Like, I've read all this information, and when I finally got to the place where I needed to execute, like, I needed a whole nother set of data points and skills. And I just eventually came to the point to recognize, by faith, I'm going to choose not to study this and just trust that God's going to show up whenever I need it. But it was by faith. There's nothing inside of me. I call this 5 part of my heart. I call him Bob because Bob is an admired mentor in my life. He's a pastor. He introduced me to the intellectual side of pastoral life, and so I really respected him. But Bob, man, I mean, he can buy some books online, but sometimes he really just does not come through. But I will say there is the gift of the 5, and the gift of Bob in my life is that even if I'm not intentional about it, I'm always gathering and I'm always learning. And that capacity to learn and be curious about a lot of things is a gift for the 6, because whenever it's the moment comes, usually I've got something. And Beth usually comments to me like, "How did you remember that? Like, where did you pull that from?"
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I don't know why it just sticks out, but there's sometimes that things stick out and I remember them, and eventually they show up in life, and maybe the Spirit's reminding me of it. Well, the next wing is the type 7 wing, and so Nate, you're going to be first on type 7.
Yeah. Nate's got a lot of 7 in him.
That's right. So the 7's outgoing, spontaneous. I can get a little distracted and impatient. This 7 part of the 6's heart is friendly and likes to have fun. It helps to establish larger support systems through friendships and broader connections, so they can immediately seek guidance from others when you feel uncertain about what to do. When the wing 7 part is trying to protect your wounded child, there are a few unhealthy behaviors that show up. They begin to demand that others meet their needs for excitement and fun to distract you from your own anxieties. They use escape hatches, these kind of unmitigated indulgences, to avoid anxieties and self-doubt, to try to get away from the contradictory thoughts of their inner committee, which I do want to talk to you guys about the inner committee and how you experience it. for you personally. But they avoid the 7 part is seeking to avoid feelings of pain, sadness, and disappointment by looking at the brighter side of life and seeking out new adventures. When I saw Bright Side, I thought, did you guys ever watch Monty Python?
Oh yeah.
Look on the bright side of life.
Again, sixes humor.
That's so good.
But when our 7 wing, that part shows up under the leadership of the beloved child, it no longer needs these unhealthy strategies. So you're there, it's going to look a lot different. Experience moments of grace and joy, which enables their hearts to be more trusting of others and God. Believe that life is not all serious and daunting with all of its different contingencies, but actually they can move towards richness with life-giving experiences and emotions, including happiness, abundance, and freedom. And they can relax from their role of always being the responsible one and delight in just being present with people. So like we talked about with our 5, now let's talk about the 7. So Nate, tell us about how your 7 part shows up. Have you given your 7 part a name?
I have. So I call my 7 part Bing Bong. He is from the movie Inside Out. He's
Yes.
Oh, yes.
that little toy that
Yes.
she forgot about, and Joy found him. And man, he gave so much life to that girl. And his sole focus was just bringing joy to her heart. And so as I pictured my 7 part, I think I realized this in college through counseling, but that my 7 part, with led by the wounded child, yearns and needs connection to a very unhealthy place. Like you said, it has to be with people. But led by the beloved child, man, I see so much calmness and joy and laughter and peace. And so I can think through moments where, you might take out your phone and take pictures and videos, and you're like, I got to capture the moment before it's gone and all that. And maybe I would be frantic at any other time or anxious to really savor it, and I don't feel rested in the moment. But there are times where I feel myself just calm down because the beloved child is there and present. And so Bing Bong is allowed to do his best and just to make a smile come on my face, to look at the people around me and to enjoy the moment, to look at the Lord's grace and enjoy what he has for me. But wounded child wise, this yearning for connection, I told some of the coworkers the other day that I almost scored the most extreme extrovert on the Myers-Briggs when I was younger. And I'm not life of the party extrovert. I am just almost always wanting to be with people. And it doesn't have to mean we're doing a ton of stuff. It's like, I just want to be there. And so growing up, especially with our family and friends that I had to be with someone. I remember there's a girl I dated in high school. She went out to hang out with some friends. And they were her friends. They weren't really my friends, so I didn't go. But I'm not sure, Mom and Dad, if I told you this. I'm sure I did.
But on the podcast.
Here we go. Here we go.
It's not bad.
Everybody lean in. Everybody lean in.
But I felt like a zombie at that moment. Like I felt all energy leave me.
Nate, to be quite honest, yeah, we would see that and experience it. Like we just, you were like a zombie walking around the house, aimless. Like I'm not with people.
Well,
I don't
and
know what to
also-
do with myself.
Also, it'd be like, hey, go play your guitar. You're really
No,
great at that. And he's
no
like,
way.
I'm supposed to go in my bedroom by myself and practice the guitar. Like, that's so boring.
I mean, just listen to Beth's tone of voice, and if you're watching on YouTube, you would have seen her face. That's what Nate looked like. Like he just lost all affect.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be alone, and there's no happiness in being alone.
But if I were like, hey, okay, bring the guitar down here, and while I'm cooking, you can practice, and and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that.
Difference.
Yeah. So Nate is always connecting. He's connecting with other people, like people to people. Like, hey, you got to get to know this person. And I mean, what's interesting is as I'm listening to you, I hear the sweetness of not just the beloved child 7 part, but the 9 as well. Like they're working together so that the 9 is bringing this sense of calm to the 6, but also which allows you to experience the joy and the fun.
Well, and even noting too that 7-like attributes are very 6-ish. As Nate was describing it.
Yep.
It's not the same frenetic energy that you can get from an unhealthy 7. It's very 6-ish using 7 energy. Well, Erin, Adam, do you have a great relationship with your 7 wing, and how does it show up in your life?
Adam's nickname has been the Jester.
Yeah, but is that his 7 wing?
Yes,
Adam?
it is.
Okay.
For years, that's what I've called that part of me, is the Jester, which now he's known as the Jackal for other reasons, but listener, viewer, the Jester part of me is the type 7, and recently, shortly after I onboarded on the team, Jeff, we were in a team meeting, and you called out the 7 part of me by name, except you used the wrong name. You said the Jackal's here instead of the Jester, and that has stuck. So. This is totally stuck. So now the 7 part of me is the Jackal. But yeah, so it is this part of me that, like Nate was saying, in high school, it especially manifested as I was with people, and I wasn't trying to be the center of attention or the center of the room. Now it's what you mentioned earlier when you were reading your description of a misaligned 7 part, is it's this part of me that wants to reach for escape or reach for the fix. And when it is most noticeable is like at night or on the weekends, when it's like, man, I've worked all day. We finally got the kids in bed, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but like I just want to like mindlessly look at stuff on Amazon or Zappos. I want to look at shoes while having Stranger Things or The Office or something on TV in the background, and then like my favorite snack. Like I just want all that stuff, and I just want to like totally. And I'm not saying that's not refreshing or that's bad, but there's a way in which that part of me can overly crave, overly reach, overly depend on that, and that's how that part shows up in a misaligned way.
So let's talk about your guys' Enneagram paths. So for the type 6, you guys have the Enneagram path of type 3 and type 9. Those are the lines that are connected to you guys. And again, you use them either in misaligned or aligned ways, depending on if the wounded child or the beloved child is leading the way. So the type 3 part of your heart is efficient, effective, it's competent, adaptable, goal-oriented, can be very competitive, driven, and very charming. Now, it supports your main type by creating supportive and loyal connections with others through accomplishments and determination in how they excel at all things. So when your type 3 part is kind of being or following the wounded child, some things can happen. You can get really busy to avoid feeling anxious. You might refuse to try something new if failure is a possibility. And you can worry about your self-image and about what others might think. But when your 3 part is following the leadership of the beloved child, other great things are starting to happen. You know how to respect yourself. You know how to trust yourself. You know how to be confident and assertive. And you're also going to start to meet goals. You're going to set those goals up and you're going to devise a system of what's most effective and efficient to accomplish those goals. And then you're going to start to move forward with confidence. And this isn't arrogance. This is the following the beloved child. So this is actually a healthy way where you hear your inner committee and you let them know, hey, I hear you. Thank you for chiming in with all of these thoughts. But here's the direction we're going to move in now. And we do it with assertiveness. And that's when the 6 brings so much discernment and wisdom that we all really get to enjoy. And I know you guys sometimes don't feel like you offer that because of the self-doubt, but that's really where the 6 can start to shine is, no, you guys are discerning. And so we want you to have a healthy sense of confidence to bring that forward. So why don't you guys let us know, how does the 3 show up in wounded child ways and beloved child ways?
Yeah, I could share in brief. I mean, in wounded child ways, I noticed that I definitely overwork, like you mentioned, using busyness to try to avoid as a way to cope with anxiety. And then I can really find that I can be controlled by what I think others think of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is painful. That's really painful. So I noticed that in the misaligned ways. But my type 3 part of me is such a gift to me because when it shows up and when I'm aligned with the truth of the gospel, this part of me functions almost like this coach that says, "Go for it! Like
Yeah.
you can do this, and take a risk." Um, there's this inner confidence, there's this trusting of
Mm-hmm.
myself, and I also find that I just take action more decisively and more efficient. So yeah, that's my relationship to the 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same when I am in the wounded space of the 3, I'm very insecure and all that self-doubt or second guessing
Yeah.
or and I'll literally have to go to my husband and be like, well, what about and I have to run it out or talk it out, like, and
Yeah.
he just almost has to be a sounding board to me to be like, that's not true, or I don't think that person's really thinking that, I think you're reading into
Mm.
that, the projection or whatever. And I know when I'm kind of circling the drain there, it's like, okay, I'm not in a good place there. And
Circling the
I love
drain.
that.
That just
drain,
caught my imagination now.
Yes, I love that.
I just like, I gotta like throw the life raft and get out. And then the healthy side is when it's the best feeling because finally I'm like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm doing it. And it's a beautiful feeling of feeling confidence. It's the opposite of the insecurity.
Yeah.
Now I'm secure and I know, especially in areas of my life, pockets of my life that I know I'm rocking it, or I know I'm like when I'm coaching someone and I know I'm right there. It's the best
Mm-hmm.
feeling because you're exactly
Right.
where you should be doing what you should be doing. And it's just you're not even worried with all those what ifs. Everything goes
Yeah.
away, and you're right in that space in that wheelhouse.
Yes.
So good. Nate, what about you?
Yeah. So I've named my type 3 part champ. Um, yeah. So just based off of champion, because I think similarly to what you guys are talking about, champ with the beloved child really becomes uh, he really becomes what I and others know I can be.
Mm.
Um, in confidence and in faith. But the wounded child, like you guys mentioned as well, is just very image focused. And so always worrying what others think about me. Um, and then I saw a lot of the overwork part of Champ in college
Mm-hmm.
when I was doing college ministry. And my junior year, I lived in the dorms to share my faith with students. And I saw a lot of guys come to know Jesus, but the second semester, um, we went to a large group meeting and I saw one of my old friends. And, she was like, "Oh, it's so good to see you." I was like, "Yeah, I know. I feel like I haven't seen you this whole year." And I realized, like, man, I had my head down to the grindstone for the whole semester and I just
Mm.
stayed in the dorms and was only with those guys, and realizing that I didn't allow myself to go and be with my other friends. I didn't give myself that
Mhm.
freedom. And so, Champ with the Wounded Child can really kind of lock me in this mindset of this is what you have to do, and this is what's going to be, you know, how you're going to succeed.
And I love that because I hope that the listeners, what they're hearing from you guys is that you're still a 6. Like Nate, what you're saying, like, I am faithful and committed
Oh,
and
yeah.
responsible to, bring Christ to those in the dorm. So there's the 6 part of your heart. And then there's the 3 that adds the weight of accomplishment, adds the weight of, like, we need to set up these goals and do it. And like you said, put your nose to the grindstone and never come up for air, and so how they work together in those circumstances, that's where these aha moments come in. And it's so important for us to recognize how these parts of us show up in negative and healthy ways, because if we don't, we're either going to continue down the unhealthy path, or if we might not even recognize how we can bring that healthy part into our life and assist us. So we want to recognize them both. Well, let's jump into the last part, which is the best part of you, the type 9.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay, so us 9s, what we bring to you, no, just kidding, for good and not good, is the type 9 part of your heart is warm.
I will say this. All of us 6s, Nate's not married, but we're all married to 9s.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right.
The best type.
It really
No,
is the best part of me.
My best
Honey, if you're
friend,
listening,
my best
you're
friend's
the
a
best
9.
part.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
That's awesome.
Shred it. Well, that's right. One of my great friends is a 9 as well.
It's very true.
And best friend is a 6. See? Like we're just trying to replicate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so the type 9 part of your heart is warm and loving, caring. It's focused on affirming and supporting others' agendas, but it can also merge and over-accommodate to other people's desires just to keep the peace and not disturb relationships. Now, the 9 part supports your 6 type by being more trusting, encouraging you to rest, seeing that others have different viewpoints, and so that you can kind of see those different viewpoints and not be so rigid on just your own viewpoint. And it's also more accepting and gracious. It's more it's more non-judgmental. Now, the way that 9 can be misaligned in following the wounded child is that you might deal with stress by shutting down. That can be lots of different ways. It could be numbing out with TV, video games, shopping, eating, whatever. There's lots of different ways, but it definitely wants to get away from that stress, and those are some of the ways that it can do that. But it also assists you in forgetting yourself, because you might be feeling that your security is at risk if you're focusing just on yourself. So you want to find this peaceful loyalty by focusing on other people's passions and desires and really trying to come through for them, hoping that you'll garner their affection, their relationship, their loyalty, their commitment to you. And then you might express irritations when others interrupt or disturb you, because maybe you're just wanting some like cozy comfort. You just want to have comfortable routines going on, and someone is disrupting that. But the good news is that when you're following the beloved child, the type 9 offers you some really great attributes where you take the time to relax and enjoy the moments. Nate, that's what you were, really talking about. Like, enjoy the moments, just be in the moment, be in the relationship. And this is when your mind starts to slow down. Now, as a 6, your mind is constantly racing, so we don't want those that are out there going, my mind never stops. Well, it's never going to stop like a 9's can, but it's going to slow down. It's going to help you to see really what's going on in the moment. And it's a reality check, but it's not a pessimistic check. It's what's really going on? And then you might be able to empathize with others and to extend compassion because you're seeing through their perspective. And then lastly, just to be able to develop secure relationships with this calm, steady, stable presence, and that it's less reactive. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, how does the 9 part of your heart show up in the wounded child way and also the beloved child way?
I really have a love-hate relationship with my 9 part. So I actually call him Dobby from Harry Potter. The reason that is because as many of you guys know, and hopefully now as my mom's explained it, the 9 unaligned with the gospel is the blind spot of the type 6.
Hmm.
And I remember the first time that my mom told me that. I was in college, and every time I would come home for breaks, I would get very lazy, and just had no motivation to do anything. And like I said 5 minutes ago, that when I was at college, I was busy, busy, busy. Um, and so I was always like, what is this? And she was like, it's your blind spot. And, she just told me like how we just go to the slothfulness of the 9. And I was like, no, like, I don't like that
And
part
it's
about
mainly
me.
for 6s, mainly at home or with
Right.
like a really close friend.
Sure.
Because they don't want to do that. Like that's the opposite of what the 6s want to be responsible and hardworking and dutiful. But this 9 part, this wounded part, misaligned part will come out, at home a little bit more often than they even recognize.
Right. And so I named him Dobby because in the second movie of Harry Potter, you get to meet Dobby, and his character is shown first as this loving character for Harry, trying to protect him. But every way that Dobby is trying to protect Harry actually ends up harming him. And I
Mm,
kept finding that this 9 part to me, this blind spot, was showing up so much that it was keeping me from feeling confident in myself, from
Hmm.
going out and doing the things that I wanted. And I felt stuck in this
mm,
slothfulness. And so I kept using kind of these numbing agents in my life, whether it be food or TV and entertainment, maybe even friends and all that stuff. And so, um, but as I've gotten older and continued to work with Dobby, what he's become is a calming presence. Um, like you said, Mom, a presence that brings a lot of empathy.
Hmm.
So
mhm.
as I've been getting into more counseling things in education, I see Dobby using his real gifts as
Yeah.
being very empathetic, being a great listener, and being that place where someone can come and rest. And as a 6, man, I just want to champion that so much. And so I'm so thankful for Dobby. But at the same time, like Harry was in the movies, just so frustrated with them when he was causing problems trying to help.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great
It's a great
example.
example.
Aaron or Adam?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think for it's a double-edged sword with the 9 because when I'm finally there and I'm having peace, um, it is really hard to. It's almost like I'm giving myself permission to finally be there, and so then it's like, oh, it feels so good. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, I don't. I have to almost be mindful of like, okay, you only get to hang out here for so long. It's not, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like a vacation. It feels good, but like you can't exist here. And then the beautiful part of the 9, the beloved, is 2 things that stand out is just really seeing both sides and
Yep.
Mm,
not being so black and white or really
Right.
um, it's just a nice place to have those eyes of understanding everybody and really having that
yeah.
compassion, and it feels really great. It's a very kind of peaceful place, and then to have that when I am in that peace, it's like, please don't interrupt that peace. You know what I mean? I'm
Hmm.
on vacation, like,
Hmm.
please do
Yeah.
not disturb. And you want to put a do not disturb
Hmm.
sign out, and when people do, it's like I kind of get really ugly, like I'm finally here and I've checked all my
Hmm.
boxes and everything's done and I'm finally giving myself permission. So please don't
Yeah.
interrupt. Like it's just
Yeah.
not going to be good. And sometimes I have to even tell my family that, like, hey, when I'm here, I'm chilling, I'm done,
Mm-hmm.
I'm off hours, like I'm off duty, and it's a no,
Yes.
like, or I'll even have
Yeah.
to say to
Sure.
protect myself or not get ugly, hey, for the next 2 hours, it's really important to me. I'm doing this, or, I'm going to hot yoga, whatever it is, I'm whatever. So it's a beautiful place to experience that nine, but it also can be, I don't like it to be interrupted when I'm there.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, just to let you know, S9s don't like it being interrupted, which is all the time.
That's so funny. Well, hopefully our listeners have really captured what it is that we're trying to capture with the Enneagram Internal Profile, is that there are a lot of different parts to who we are, and these various parts show up in helpful ways and unhelpful ways. One of the ways to help visualize that is thinking like, here we are, we're on a bus, and all of our various parts are on the bus. And the question is, who's driving the bus? Is it our wounded child? And are we using our connecting types in order to protect that wounded child? And are they driving the bus? Because if that's true, all the other kids are going to be anxious as well and functioning in unhealthy ways. But if visualizing the bus, if our beloved child is driving, you're going to find that all the other kids, they know their place. They know that they're secure. And so they don't need all these unhealthy coping mechanisms in order to relate to our world. In some ways, this is actually part of what it means to be coached with the Enneagram. It helps to give us clarity and specificity as to how to practice mindfulness. If you're interested in Enneagram coaching, you can actually find one of our certified coaches by going to www.myenneagramcoach.com, and we've got coaches all around the globe that can help you in all kinds of different specific
Just like
niches.
Erin and Adam
That's
and Nate.
right. Erin, Adam, and Nate. That's exactly right. And if you're looking to learn more about your Enneagram Internal Profile, be sure to look at previous episodes. But don't forget to pre-order our new book, More Than Your Number. You can find it and pre-order anywhere where books are sold. It releases in September, where we actually walk through each of the principles of EIP, as well as applying it to each Enneagram type.
And as always, remember, the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder. It's the gospel that transforms us.